What if an entire civilization could vanish, not in fire, not in war, but quietly, as if it simply chose to disappear? Imagine walking through a city where homes still stand, tools still lie where hands once placed them, and streets remain perfectly planned. Yet no voices echo, no footsteps follow, no memory explains why everyone left. This didn't happen once. It happened again and again across the ancient world. Cultures that mastered farming, art, and engineering gone. Not destroyed, but erased like breath fading from cold glass. History celebrates beginnings. It records power and rise. But when civilizations disappear without violence, history grows silent. And it is in that silence, where answers should be, that the past becomes truly unsettling. The night is often where mysteries feel most alive. In the quiet hours, when the world slows to a gentle hum, the past begins to whisper its forgotten stories. This introduction invites the listener into that space, soft, dark, and reflective, where the boundaries between history and imagination start to blur. As we drift into the opening moments of the documentary, we step into a world where entire civilizations once thrived with vibrancy, only to dissolve, as if someone blew out the candle of their existence. Their footprints remain faintly etched in the sands of time, but the people who made them seem to have vanished without a trace. Civilizations are usually remembered by what they leave behind: stones stacked with purpose, pottery painted with care, tools shaped by practiced hands. Yet for some ancient societies, the traces left behind are too few, too strange, or too scattered to tell a full story. They rose, they flourished, and then they disappeared, sometimes slowly, sometimes with shocking suddenness. And the questions they left us with linger like a soft echo in a long, empty corridor. What happened to them? Why did they fall? How could a people strong enough to sculpt, build, trade, and dream suddenly become nothing more than an archaeological riddle? As the introduction unfolds, we explore this delicate balance between the known and the unknown. History gives us fragments, broken figurines, abandoned cities, undeciphered scripts, and from these, we try to stitch together answers. But the truth is often hidden in the spaces between the evidence, where silence becomes a part of the narrative. It is in that silence, that stillness, that this documentary finds its tone. Calm, slow, and contemplative, drifting like low morning fog over forgotten ruins. We aim to create a space where the mystery can breathe, where imagination and history work together not to solve, but to explore. There is something strangely comforting about these ancient unknowns. In a world overflowing with information, a mystery that refuses to unravel has a quiet power. It invites reflection more than resolution. It encourages curiosity instead of certainty. And as we guide the listener through the shadowy corners of long-lost civilizations, we do so not to unearth definitive answers, but to experience the beauty of the unanswered question. Like a faded tapestry whose missing threads only make the remaining colors more vivid, these stories of disappearance highlight the fragility and wonder of human existence. Throughout this journey, we will travel across continents and through millennia. We will stand at the edges of deserts where cities lie buried beneath shifting dunes, and in dense forests where ancient sculptures stare with expressionless eyes. We will follow the faint echoes of sailors who crossed oceans, artists who shaped clay, warriors who carved symbols into stone. Some of these cultures disappeared due to reasons we can partly understand: climate change, wars, migrations, while others seem to have faded for causes still wrapped in deep, unbroken mystery. Each one offers a different kind of question, a different kind of silence. But before we begin exploring these vanished worlds, we set the tone here, in this opening section, to ease the listener into a state of gentle curiosity. The pacing is unhurried, soothing, almost meditative. It mirrors the slow drift of time itself, moving from one thought to another like waves lapping quietly against the shore. The introduction acts as a lantern guiding us into a darkened hallway lined with forgotten histories. Its flickering light reveals just enough to intrigue, but leaves enough shadow to keep the mind wandering. The idea of a civilization disappearing overnight may sound dramatic, but in the vast span of human history, even decades or centuries can feel like the blink of an eye. From an archaeologist's perspective, a culture flourishing for 1,000 years and then vanishing in a single generation does indeed feel like a sudden disappearance. And to us, lying back or getting ready to sleep, these stories take on an almost dreamlike quality, real yet distant, factual yet mysterious. The blend creates a perfect mood for nighttime listening, calming, immersive, and filled with gentle intrigue. As we close this introduction, we prepare to step into the first of many ancient worlds. Each story will unfold slowly, wrapped in historical detail, softened by atmospheric storytelling. Each section will glide into the next with a sense of continuity, as if we are walking through interconnected chambers of a long-abandoned palace. The journey ahead will take us from Mesopotamia to Africa, from Europe to the Pacific, exploring civilizations whose endings came with little explanation. Their silent ruins and enigmatic artifacts remain like whispers carried on the wind. And so, with a calm breath and quiet anticipation, we begin, moving from the soft mystery of this introduction into the first deep dive, where the ancient Ubaid culture awaits with its snake-like figurines and shadowy origins. The path ahead is filled with riddles, but we walk it slowly, gently, letting the past reveal itself one whisper at a time. Long before the great cities of Sumer rose from the Mesopotamian plains, an even older and more mysterious culture thrived quietly along the slow, winding rivers of the ancient Near East. This was the Ubaid culture, a civilization older than the first kings, older than the earliest writing, and older even than the myths that would later shape Mesopotamian identity. In this section, we step gently into their world, a world that feels both familiar and strangely alien, illuminated only by the fragments they left behind. Their story unfolds slowly, like a buried memory emerging from beneath layers of time, inviting us to explore a society whose disappearance is as puzzling as its origins. The Ubaid people were master builders long before anyone recorded the first line of history. They constructed large, organized settlements with multi-room houses, courtyards, and advanced irrigation systems that guided water across dry land with quiet precision. These early towns suggest a community that valued planning, stability, and cooperation, qualities that hint at a society far ahead of its time. Yet for all their sophistication, the Ubaid left behind no writing, no inscriptions, no direct explanations of who they were. Their silence is profound, deepening the air of mystery that surrounds them. One of the most striking aspects of the Ubaid culture comes from their unusual figurines. Small clay sculptures depicting humanoid figures with elongated heads, almond-shaped eyes, and slender limbs. Some appear reptilian, leading to their popular nickname, the Ubaid lizard people. These figurines often show the figures holding infants, sitting on thrones, or adorned with carefully shaped headdresses. To modern eyes, they appear almost otherworldly, as if they belong to a myth not yet written. Though archaeologists caution against sensational interpretations, the figurines undeniably add a layer of intrigue that sets the Ubaid apart from other ancient cultures. The presence of these figurines raises questions that cannot be easily answered. Were they symbols of gods, representations of ancestral spirits, ritual objects, toys, or perhaps depictions of beings from mythologies that have been entirely lost to time? The truth remains hidden, obscured by millennia of erosion, abandonment, and transformation. And as we examine these artifacts with quiet curiosity, we feel the tension between what is known and what will likely never be fully understood. Beyond their figurines, the Ubaid people achieved impressive advances in agriculture and irrigation. They diverted river waters into long channels, turning dry soil into farmland capable of sustaining large communities. Their success laid the foundation for later civilizations, making the Ubaid culture a silent architect of the world that followed. Yet, their growth and innovation stand in contrast to the mystery of their decline. For reasons still debated, the Ubaid settlements were gradually abandoned, their culture fading away as new societies rose around them. Some scholars believe climate change played a key role. Rivers may have shifted, farmlands may have dried, and environmental pressures could have forced communities to move elsewhere. Others propose migration, slow and peaceful blending with neighboring groups, dissolving the Ubaid identity into the emerging Sumerian culture. There are also theories of internal change, suggesting that as populations grew and resources tightened, social structures may have evolved or fractured in subtle ways. What makes their disappearance puzzling is the lack of clear evidence. No signs of war, no widespread destruction, no mass graves. Nothing to suggest a violent end. Instead, the Ubaid culture seems to have faded quietly, almost gently, as if stepping out of history without disturbance. Their disappearance was not an overnight collapse, but in the sweep of human time, it feels sudden, like a candle flame going out without smoke, leaving darkness without explanation. This contrast between their long-lasting influence and their soft vanishing contributes to their enigmatic aura. A culture so foundational, so deeply woven into the beginnings of civilization, simply slipped into obscurity. As we explore their story, the quietness of the Ubaid world becomes a key theme. Unlike later Mesopotamian civilizations filled with epics, kings, wars, and loud symbols of power, the Ubaid remain understated. They built lasting structures, but not monumental ones. They created art, but in small, delicate forms. They lived in organized communities, but left little sign of hierarchy or conflict. Everything about them suggests stability and simplicity. Yet stability can be fragile, and simplicity can be vulnerable to forces that leave little trace behind. In this section, we also consider the Ubaid's role as a bridge between the prehistoric and historic eras. Their innovations in farming, settlement planning, and social organization helped lay the groundwork for the great Mesopotamian civilizations that followed. The temples of Eridu, one of the world's oldest cities, began during the Ubaid period. This makes them part of a lineage that would eventually lead to the grand ziggurats, complex religious systems, and rich mythologies of Sumer. Yet as Sumer arose, the Ubaid identity dissolved, absorbed into a new cultural world. The contrast here is striking. The Ubaid culture was foundational but forgotten, influential but nearly invisible in later histories. Their fingerprints remain on the earliest cities, but their name seldom appears in ancient records. This blending into the background of history creates a unique kind of disappearance, one not driven by destruction, but by transformation. Like the first strokes of paint beneath a masterpiece, the Ubaid helped shape the picture, but remain mostly unseen. As we move through their story, we drift gently between the factual and the mysterious. The archaeological evidence grounds us: houses, pottery, irrigation channels, while the unexplained figurines and quiet fade-out of their culture open the door to curiosity. The Ubaid remind us that history is not just about what happened, but also about what we cannot fully recover. The silence they left behind becomes part of their legacy, inviting endless contemplation. The section closes with a slow, reflective shift toward the next civilization in our journey. The Ubaid culture, with its enigmatic figurines and premature disappearance, feels like an early chapter in humanity's book of forgotten worlds. As their story dims into the soft twilight of ancient memory, we turn now toward another vanished society, one that built vast settlements, painted vibrant pottery, and mysteriously burned their cities to the ground. The path leads us gently into the realm of the Cucutini Trypillian culture, where fire becomes both a symbol of creation and an unexplained force of destruction. Long before the rise of classical Europe, long before the marble temples and empires that dominate history books, There existed a civilization in the forests and rolling hills of Eastern Europe that built some of the largest prehistoric settlements ever known. The Cucuteni-Trypillian culture, spread across modern-day Romania, Ukraine, and Moldova, flourished for thousands of years, creating vast proto-cities, exquisite pottery, and an enigmatic tradition that continues to puzzle archaeologists today. Their story is one of contrasts, beauty and destruction, growth and abandonment, light and fire. And like many ancient civilizations shrouded in mystery, they eventually vanished with no written testimony to explain their fate. As we step into their world, we find ourselves entering settlements far larger than anything else from their era. Some Trypillian sites housed tens of thousands of people, arranged in concentric circles, with houses lined up like beads on a great spiral necklace. These structures, made of clay and wood, were carefully built, painted, and decorated, reflecting a society that valued both function and artistry. To imagine these ancient cities is to picture a quiet but bustling landscape of clay homes glowing with earth tones, arranged so precisely they resemble the early blueprint of urban life. What makes this civilization truly remarkable is its pottery. The Cucuteni-Trypillian people produced some of the most striking ceramics of the prehistoric world: spirals, symbols, and vibrant patterns painted in red, black, and cream. Each piece seems to hold meaning, though the messages encoded in their swirling motifs have been lost to time. Some believe the patterns were spiritual symbols. Others think they represented cycles of nature or cosmic forces. Whatever their significance, the pottery reflects a sophisticated culture with a deep aesthetic sensibility. Their ceramics feel alive with movement, as if telling stories in a language we no longer speak. Yet the most mysterious aspect of the Cucuteni-Trypillian civilization is their tradition of burning their own settlements. Archaeologists have discovered evidence that every few generations, perhaps every 60 to 80 years, entire villages were deliberately set on fire. Not just a few homes, but every single structure. Thousands of dwellings across hundreds of sites were reduced to ash and hardened clay. And these burnings happened repeatedly, systematically, over many centuries. The people rebuilt their settlements afterward, often in the exact same location, only to burn them again later. This cycle of creation and destruction remains one of the great riddles of ancient Europe. Why would a thriving civilization destroy its own homes? One theory suggests ritual cleansing. Perhaps fire symbolized renewal, rebirth, or the cyclical nature of life. Another theory points to practical reasons. Maybe burning the houses transformed the clay walls into more durable material, creating solid foundations for new structures. Some propose social or religious explanations. Maybe the burnings marked generational transitions or were tied to beliefs we can no longer decipher. Others wonder if environmental factors or resource depletion forced relocations, and the fires were a structured way to close each chapter of settlement. The lack of written records means that each interpretation remains uncertain, suspended in mysterious silence left behind. The flames of these ancient fires still echo in the archaeological layers of soot and hardened clay, hinting at a tradition we can observe but cannot fully understand. The contrast between the beauty of their painted pottery and the destruction of their settlements creates a narrative filled with tension and curiosity, a fitting hallmark of a vanished world. As their population grew, the Cucuteni-Trypillians developed increasingly complex social structures. Their settlements contained large communal spaces, suggesting shared decision-making or collective rituals. Tools and artifacts found across their sites indicate specialization. Farmers, artisans, builders, working together to support large communities. They cultivated fields, raised animals, and crafted goods that were likely traded over long distances. Everything points to a society that was stable, advanced, and deeply interconnected. But this stability, like many ancient achievements, proved fragile. Around 3000 BCE, the Cucuteni-Trypillian culture began to decline. Their once thriving settlements were abandoned. Their pottery styles disappeared from the archaeological record, Their way of life, so long maintained through cycles of fire and rebuilding, suddenly came to an end. And the question that lingers softly in the air is, why? Some scholars point to climate change. As the weather grew colder and drier, agriculture may have become harder to sustain, forcing populations to migrate or disperse. Others believe the arrival of new groups, possibly steppe nomads, might have disrupted their settlements, leading to cultural blending or displacement. Still others suggest that internal social changes, resource exhaustion, or shifting trade patterns contributed to their decline. The truth, as with many ancient mysteries, is likely a combination of factors, interacting quietly over time. What makes their disappearance feel overnight is how suddenly their material culture vanishes in comparison to how long they flourished. For thousands of years, they painted pottery, built settlements, and repeated cycles of creation and fire. Then, in what feels like a brief moment historically, the pattern ends. The fires go out. The pottery is no longer made. The cities of clay stand silent, empty, and eventually crumble into the earth. Their story becomes one more echo in the long corridor of forgotten civilizations. As we imagine these vast proto-cities emptying out for the last time, there's a dreamlike quality to the scene. Houses once filled with voices, laughter, and daily life now sit quiet under the open sky. Spiral-painted pottery lies broken among the ashes of deliberate flames. The forests and fields slowly reclaim the land. The silence of their disappearance stands in sharp contrast to the cultural vibrancy they displayed for millennia. This contrast, the bright creativity of their art and the dark uncertainty of their sudden vanishing, gives their story a haunting beauty. Their pottery remains vibrant even as their history fades. Their settlements were grand, yet are now dust. Their fires once roared, but now speak only through hardened clay layers beneath the soil. And in this blend of presence and absence, of creation and destruction, the Cucutini Trypillian civilization occupies a place of profound intrigue in human history. As this section comes to a close, we prepare to journey from the European forests to the river valleys of South Asia. The next civilization we explore also built planned cities, developed advanced systems, and disappeared with surprising quietness. Just as the Cucutini Trypillians left behind ashes and patterns, the Indus Valley civilization left behind meticulously arranged streets and an undeciphered script. From the burning cities of Eastern Europe, we now shift gently toward the silent streets of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, where another ancient mystery awaits. Long before the great kingdoms of the Ganges, long before Sanskrit hymns or epic wars were etched into memory, there existed a civilization so advanced, so meticulously organized, that its cities still inspire awe today. The Indus Valley civilization, stretching across modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, stood as one of humanity's earliest urban marvels. Yet for all its achievements, it remains one of the quietest civilizations in history. Its people left behind no deciphered writing, no grand monuments celebrating kings, no dramatic stories of conquest or downfall. What they did leave were cities laid out with astonishing precision, silent, symmetrical, and filled with mysteries that whisper through every brick. As we step gently into the streets of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, we find ourselves in a world that flourished between 2600 and 1900 BCE. These were not primitive settlements, but carefully planned urban centers designed with a vision that modern engineers still admire. Straight streets intersected at perfect angles, forming a grid long before cities like Athens or Rome conceived such order. Homes had courtyards, drainage systems, and even early forms of indoor plumbing. Great public baths, granaries, and gathering halls stood at the heart of each city. Everything suggests a society that valued cleanliness, structure, and community well-being. Yet, despite these advanced features, the Indus Valley civilization remains strangely anonymous. No royal tombs, no inscriptions boasting achievements, no portraits of rulers. Instead, we find small seals carved with animals and symbols, tiny, delicate pieces that hint at a written language that is yet to be decoded. The script appears everywhere, on pottery, on amulets, on tablets. But its meaning is locked away, guarding secrets that even modern scholars cannot fully unlock. This inability to read their words amplifies the quietness surrounding their world. A civilization with millions of inhabitants rose and fell, yet not a single deciphered sentence remains to explain who they were. The contrast between their technical brilliance and their silent legacy forms the heart of their mystery. Their drainage systems were unparalleled, featuring covered sewers, household bathrooms, and sophisticated water management techniques. This suggests not only engineering skill, but also a strong emphasis on hygiene and public health. Their granaries and standardized bricks reveal organization at a scale seldom matched in antiquity. Each brick across thousands of miles followed the same ratio, indicating central planning or cultural cohesion beyond anything typical of the time. Yet the absence of palaces or temples raises perplexing questions. Who organized all this? What kind of government or leadership model drove such coordination? Mohenjo-daro, often called the Mound of the Dead, stands as a silent city frozen in time. Walking through its remains in imagination, we pass by wells every few meters, suggesting access to clean water was a priority for all citizens, not just elites. We see long, straight roads lined with structured buildings. We find the Great Bath, a massive structure potentially used for ritual or communal purposes, its waterproofing still intact after thousands of years. But even here, in the heart of a great city, there is no inscription explaining its purpose, no murals telling stories of gods, no carvings of kings claiming ownership. This absence leaves room for possibilities. Perhaps their society was egalitarian, with shared power and communal decision-making. Perhaps religion was practiced privately or symbolically rather than through grand temples. Or perhaps their cities once held organic forms of art and storytelling that have not survived the passage of time. In the mysterious stillness of their ruins, we are reminded that silence does not mean simplicity. It may mean a worldview unlike any we can easily reconstruct. But what makes the Indus Valley civilization even more intriguing is not only how they lived, but how they vanished. Their decline appears sudden in archaeological terms, yet quiet and strangely peaceful. Unlike other ancient collapses marked by war, fire, or dramatic destruction, the Indus Valley cities show no clear signs of violence. Many buildings were simply left behind. Streets gradually filled with dust. Workshops stopped producing goods. And slowly, the once thriving cities became empty shells. Why did such a highly organized civilization crumble? Numerous theories have been proposed, each offering a piece of the puzzle. Climate change is one of the strongest possibilities. Evidence suggests that the monsoon patterns they relied on for agriculture began to shift, leading to droughts and declining crop yields. Rivers that fed their land, especially the Gagarhakra, thought by some to be the ancient Sarasvati, may have dried or changed course, leaving communities without reliable water. Another theory speaks of tectonic activity altering river systems, forcing populations to migrate eastward toward the Ganges Plains. It is also possible that trade networks collapsed, weakening economies and leading people to disperse in search of new opportunities. Some scholars even consider the slow erosion of soil fertility or changing societal structures, creating pressures that gradually dissolve communal life. But the haunting part is that the final years of the Indus Valley civilization remain only partially illuminated. Without written records, we cannot know their thoughts, their fears, or their decisions during these transitions. We cannot hear their voices as they faced environmental stress or shifting landscapes. We see only the empty homes, the abandoned workshops, the silent wells. The quietness of their decline mirrors the quietness of their identity as a whole. And yet, they did not disappear entirely. Many researchers believe that rather than collapsing violently, the Indus people slowly merged into other regional cultures. Their descendants may have carried forward elements of their language, customs, and agricultural techniques. The civilization's influence may continue subtly in the fabric of South Asian cultural and genetic heritage. Their disappearance feels abrupt in archaeological layers, but in human terms, it may have been a slow transformation, blending rather than breaking. The contrast between their monumental organization and the soft, almost peaceful nature of their decline gives their story a dreamlike quality. Like a city swallowed by mist, its outlines fading but never fully gone. This gentle fade stands in sharp difference to other ancient civilizations whose endings were loud and catastrophic. The Indus Valley people left behind more questions than answers, and their greatest mystery, their undeciphered script, continues to keep the past just out of reach. As this section draws to a close, we step away from the orderly streets of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, leaving behind their clean lines, their quiet wells, and their speechless seals. We prepare to journey across vast distances, from the river valleys of South Asia to the open waters of the Pacific. Where the Indus Valley people mastered urban planning, the next civilization mastered the ocean itself. They were the Lapita people, bold navigators whose pottery and voyages transformed the Pacific and whose sudden disappearance remains an ocean-wrapped enigma. Across the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, an expanse so wide and deep that it seems to swallow time itself, there once lived a culture whose courage and ingenuity defy imagination. The Lapita people, emerging around 1500 BCE, are known today as the ancestors of the Polynesians, Melanesians, and Micronesians. But before they became the legendary voyagers of Oceania, they were a community whose sudden appearance and equally sudden disappearance in the archaeological record remain among the most intriguing mysteries of the ancient world. Their story unfolds not through towering monuments or written texts, but through shards of beautifully patterned pottery and the faint traces of settlements scattered across islands like stepping stones cast into the sea. As we step into their world, the scenery shifts dramatically from the structured streets of the Indus Valley to endless blue horizons. The Lapita were not builders of cities, they were builders of journeys. Their achievements lie not in land-based architecture, but in the mastery of open ocean navigation at a time when most of the world stayed close to familiar shores. They built double-hulled canoes capable of traversing thousands of kilometers, guided not by compasses or maps, but by the stars, wind, waves, and the subtle signs of the ocean. In the quiet rhythm of this documentary, their story feels like a long, steady breath, a flowing movement across water rather than land. Their pottery is the hallmark of their culture, instantly recognizable by its geometric and intricate dentate-stamped designs. These patterns, circles, spirals, lines, and grids, carry a visual harmony that reflects both precision and artistry. Some scholars believe the motifs held symbolic or social meaning, perhaps indicating clan identity or spiritual concepts. Others think the pottery may have served practical functions, used for cooking, storage, or rituals. The designs are so distinctive that archaeologists can trace Lapita movements simply by following the appearance and disappearance of this pottery across thousands of kilometers of ocean. It is as if their ceramics served as a trail of breadcrumbs, leading us through an otherwise trackless blue world. The curious part of their story is how suddenly they seem to spread. Within a few centuries, a blink in archaeological time, the Lapita people traveled from the Bismarck archipelago all the way to Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. This explosive expansion made them the first humans to reach many of the remote islands of the Pacific. Their voyages were not accidental drift journeys. They were intentional migrations filled with domesticated plants, animals, tools, and cultural traditions. Imagine the courage it took to set sail toward empty horizons, guided only by ancestral knowledge and the subtle language of nature. In the soft, sleep-friendly tone of our exploration, their journeys feel like a calm but unstoppable wave rolling across the ocean. Yet just as quickly as they appeared, their distinctive pottery style disappeared. Around 500 BCE, The production of classic lapida ceramics ceased, and many early settlements were abandoned. What remained were descendant cultures, Polynesian, Micronesian, Melanesian, but the original lapida identity seemed to dissolve into something new. This abrupt shift adds a layer of mystery to their legacy. Why did such a successful, innovative culture transform so suddenly? And why does their pottery, once so widespread, simply vanish from the archaeological record? One theory suggests that as the Lapita people moved farther east into the remote Pacific, their lifestyles changed. The new islands lacked the clay resources needed to make traditional pottery, leading them to rely more on wooden and fiber-based materials that do not survive over time. Another possibility is that cultural practices evolved. Perhaps pottery was no longer necessary or valued in the same way as the community structure shifted. Some scholars propose that the early Lapita potters were specialists, and once their skills were lost or changed through generational transitions, the tradition faded naturally. Environmental explanations also exist. The early Lapita settlements may have faced challenges such as resource scarcity, volcanic activity, or changes in climate patterns that forced relocations and adaptations. In such circumstances, cultural practices often shift rapidly, leaving archaeologists with abrupt breaks in material evidence. But these explanations only partially illuminate the mystery. The heart of the puzzle remains. A culture so skilled at long-distance navigation and so symbolically expressive in its pottery somehow left no clear narrative explaining its transformation. The contrast between their bold expansion and their quiet disappearance is striking. They were people who conquered the greatest ocean on Earth, yet the ending of their story is whispered through scattered artifacts and faint settlement remains. It is as if they sailed not only across the sea but also into obscurity, their identity dissolving like footprints in the tide. Their descendants preserve the knowledge of navigation, creating the great Polynesian tradition of star-path voyaging. But the original Lapita cultural markers slipped from sight. The silence surrounding their end invites gentle contemplation. Did they simply evolve into something new? Did their cultural identity blend across island networks, becoming inseparable from emerging societies? Were ceremonial traditions lost gradually through migration? Without written records, we cannot know. The open ocean, like time itself, holds its secrets deep and refuses easy explanations. The Lapita story also reveals a broader theme present in many ancient civilizations. Disappearance does not always mean destruction. Sometimes it means transformation. The people continue, but their defining traditions change. The Lapita may not have vanished in the dramatic sense. Rather, their distinct archaeological signature faded as their descendants spread across the Pacific. This soft blending mirrors the gentle waves they once navigated. Changes unfolding quietly, subtly, without sudden violence or collapse. As we drift toward the end of this section, we return to the image of the Pacific Ocean at dusk. The water is calm. The horizon stretches endlessly. Somewhere across this vast expanse, the echoes of ancient voyages still linger in the wind. The Lapita people mastered these waters and left patterns in clay that continue to guide our understanding of their paths. Their disappearance remains one of history's quieter mysteries. Not dramatic, but serene, like a canoe slipping into the distance until it becomes a small shadow against the setting sun. From the rolling waves of the Pacific, we now prepare to shift our focus back to land. Specifically, the sands of ancient Arabia, where another civilization once flourished in wealth and myth only to fade almost overnight. As the Lapidas sail gently into the horizon, the kingdom of Dilmun rises on our path, shimmering like a mirage between history and legend. Far across the shifting sands of the Arabian Peninsula, where heat wavers above the ground like rising ghosts and the horizon melts in a shimmering haze, there once thrived a civilization known in ancient texts as Dilmun. To Mesopotamian scribes, it was described as a place of great purity and divine blessing, a land where sickness did not dwell and the gods themselves were said to walk among mortals. Today, modern historians believe Dilmun was centered around present-day Bahrain, with influence stretching into eastern Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. But despite its reputation as a prosperous trading hub and a sacred place of mythic significance, the kingdom of Dilmun remains one of the most enigmatic societies of the ancient world, quietly fading into history with barely a whisper of explanation. Its disappearance, much like its legendary description, feels as soft and mysterious as a mirage dissolving under the desert sun. For thousands of years, Dilmun prospered as the crucial crossroads of trade between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Ships loaded with copper, timber, precious stones, and exotic goods passed through its ports, making the kingdom immensely wealthy. Archaeologists have uncovered vast burial mounds, hundreds upon hundreds of them, scattered across Bahrain, suggesting a society with both complexity and ritual depth. Yet, what we know about Dilmun often arrives secondhand, filtered through the writings of others rather than through its own voice. They left behind no deciphered texts that explain their worldview, no grand monuments carved with stories, and no clear reasons for their eventual decline. What remains is a sense of something once great, now blurred by time. The most intriguing part of Dilmun's identity lies in how frequently it appears in ancient mythology. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Dilmun is described as a kind of earthly paradise, bright, untouched, harmonious. This mythic glow makes the kingdom feel almost otherworldly, a place where history and legend overlap until one cannot tell where fact ends and imagination begins. When archaeologists finally realized that this near-mythic land corresponded to real archaeological remains in the Gulf, a profound contrast emerged. The poetic descriptions of ancient texts versus the earthly ruins standing quietly in the desert. It is this contrast between the sacred and the ordinary, between myth and clay, that makes Dilmun so compelling in a nighttime, contemplative exploration such as this. The civilization's power came largely from its location. Dilmun controlled maritime routes that were essential for the copper trade between Oman and Mesopotamia. Their merchants acted as intermediaries, distributing goods across the ancient world. The wealth generated from this trade allowed the society to flourish culturally and politically. Yet another layer of mystery arises when we consider their burial practices. The sheer number of tumuli, burial mounds, suggests a deeply spiritual culture with complex beliefs about life and death. Some mounds contain elaborate chambers, while others are simple and unadorned, indicating a society with diverse social strata. But without a written record to guide us, the true significance of these structures remains open to interpretation, inviting quiet reflection and gentle curiosity. What makes Dilmun even more puzzling is the suddenness of its decline. Around the late 2nd millennium BCE, the kingdom's prominence in trade decreased rapidly. The once thriving economy seems to have collapsed or shifted so abruptly that archaeologists detect a noticeable break in the archaeological layers. Scholars suspect several possible explanations, none of which are conclusive. One possibility is that the rise of new trade centers disrupted Dilmun's economic role. As routes changed and other powers emerged, Dilmun may have lost its strategic importance. Environmental factors, such as changes in sea levels or shifting coastlines, could also have undermined the kingdom's maritime power. Perhaps freshwater sources became scarce, or agricultural conditions deteriorated. The desert is unforgiving, and even small ecological changes can transform thriving settlements into abandoned ruins. Another theory suggests that Dilmun fell under the control of foreign empires, such as the Kassites or the Babylonians, gradually losing its cultural identity. When powerful neighbors expanded, the smaller kingdom may have been absorbed, its traditions blending with those of the conquerors. Over generations, the name Dilmun might have faded simply because it was no longer used, replaced by newer political realities. The people may have continued living in the region, but the civilization as a distinct entity dissolved quietly, without dramatic destruction or violent collapse. This gentle fading aligns with the desert itself, where tracks in the sand can disappear in a single night, erased by wind and shifting dunes. The silence surrounding its disappearance only deepens the kingdom's mystique. Unlike the Indus Valley, which left behind elaborate urban centers, or the Lapita culture, which spread across thousands of island miles, Dilmun sits at a crossroads between myth and archaeology. We know enough to sense its greatness, yet not enough to understand its ending. The calm, almost dreamlike quality of our exploration resonates with this ambiguity. The kingdom dissolves like a mirage, visible one moment, intangible the next. In a way, Dilmun's mystery is not about what happened, but about what remains unsaid. Modern excavations have revealed clues that help us glimpse daily life in Dilmun. Houses built of limestone blocks, temples dedicated to gods shared with Mesopotamia, and seals carved with distinctive motifs all paint a picture of a cultured and interconnected society. But these fragments feel like half-remembered dreams, pieces of a story without its full narrative. It is believed that Dilmun's religious significance may have stemmed from its freshwater springs, which bubbled up from beneath the earth even in the middle of the desert. These springs, known today as the Sweet Water, offered life in an otherwise arid land. To ancient people, such a place might naturally seem sacred, a gateway between the physical and divine worlds. Over time, the kingdom's spiritual reputation grew until it became immortalized in epic poetry. Still, the question remains, how did a civilization with such wealth, influence, and mythic renown disappear without leaving a clearer record? The answer may lie in the gentle nature of economic and cultural shifts. Civilizations do not always end with catastrophe. Sometimes, they simply blend into the next chapter of regional history. A change in trade routes, a shift in political power, or a gradual decline in population can cause a cultural identity to fade quietly. For nighttime listeners, the story of Dilmun carries a soft and reflective tone, a reminder that not all mysteries are dramatic. Some are subtle, woven into the sands and carried away grain by grain. As we transition toward the next ancient society, the desert wind seems to settle, and the glow of Dilmun's distant paradise dims softly. The kingdom story ends not with fire or collapse, but with silence, its ruins resting beneath the warm sun, its springs still whispering of a past once thought divine. And from this whispering desert mystery, we now turn toward a civilization in the far north, where ice and shadow shaped a very different kind of ancient disappearance. In the quiet stretches of Eastern Europe, where rolling hills blend into gentle plains and the seasons shift with slow, deliberate grace, there once flourished a society whose customs still perplex modern scholars. The Kukutini, Tripilia culture, spread across present-day Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania, thrived from around 5500 to 2750 BCE. They were remarkable for many reasons. Their enormous settlements, their exquisite pottery, their sophisticated social organization. But one detail stands out more than any other. They repeatedly burned their own villages to the ground. Not once or twice, but over and over for thousands of years. This strange, ritualistic cycle forms the heart of their mystery, a quiet puzzle that lingers like smoke rising from ancient ashes. At their peak, the Kukutini Tripilia people built settlements far larger than anything else of their time, some housing tens of thousands of inhabitants. These proto-cities were arranged in concentric rings, with houses meticulously placed in patterns that hint at careful planning and communal cooperation. The houses themselves were crafted from wood and clay, often decorated with simple yet elegant designs. Life here was peaceful, at least as far as archaeological evidence shows. There are no signs of warfare, no fortifications, no mass graves, no weapons designed for conflict. Instead, the culture seems centered on domestic life, craftsmanship, and spirituality. Their pottery, painted in swirling red, white, and black patterns, reflects a deep sense of aesthetic harmony, while their clay figurines, often female, suggest a society deeply connected to fertility, nature, and ritual. But beneath this serene surface lies the unsettling question: why burn their own homes? Archaeologists have discovered layer after layer of deliberately torched settlements. Entire villages were consumed in intense fires reaching temperatures far hotter than accidental blazes would produce. These fires were intentional, controlled, and repeated. The people did not flee in panic. They planned for the destruction. They removed valuable items first. They organized the timing. And after the burning was complete, they rebuilt their homes, sometimes in the exact same layout, sometimes altered but always rising from ashes. This cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal feels almost symbolic, as though the culture lived according to a rhythm that embraced both life and its inevitable ending. Theories abound. One suggestion is that the burnings were part of a spiritual belief system. Fire may have been seen as a cleansing force, a way to purify the living space or release the spirit of the home back to the earth. Perhaps their houses were considered temporary vessels, meant to be ritually retired after a certain number of years. The act of burning might have symbolized renewal, a kind of cultural rebirth, echoing the cycles of nature they observed in the world around them. Another idea proposes that the burnings prevented the buildup of pests or structural rot, ensuring fresh construction on stable ground. But even this practical explanation does not fully capture the scale and consistency of the practice. A more mysterious theory suggests that the burnings were connected to social or ceremonial events. Maybe communities gathered to witness the fires, treating them as collective rituals that reinforced identity and unity. The flames might have marked transitions between seasons, between generations, or between different phases of communal life. The way entire settlements participated hints at shared purpose, a communal understanding too complex for modern interpretation. Yet, even as scholars debate these possibilities, the deeper emotional resonance of the mystery remains intact. Something about their world operated according to rhythms and meanings that lie just beyond our grasp. Adding another layer of intrigue is the sudden collapse of this vast culture around 2750 BCE. After thousands of years of flourishing, the Cucutini Tripilius settlements began to disappear. Their pottery traditions faded, their mega-settlements dissolved, and their material culture melted away from the archaeological record. What happened remains uncertain. One hypothesis points to climate change. Evidence suggests a shift toward colder, drier conditions in the region, making farming less reliable. As harvests declined, large settlements may have become unsustainable, forcing people to disperse into smaller communities. Another idea points to the arrival of new groups from the northern steppe, people with different social structures and technologies, whose presence may have disrupted the peaceful rhythms of the Tripilians. However, these theories lack definitive proof. The collapse, like their burnings, remains partly shrouded in smoke. It is the contrast in their story that makes it so captivating for quiet, late-night exploration. Here was a culture capable of building some of the world's earliest proto-cities, yet never developed writing or large-scale political institutions. They created beauty in pottery and architecture, yet repeatedly destroyed their own creations with calm ritualistic precision. They lived peacefully for millennia, yet disappeared so thoroughly that later cultures in the region barely retained echoes of their existence. Their story is a gentle paradox: light filled with shadow, order intertwined with destruction, life bonded to fire. Even the figurines they crafted add to this sense of duality. Many depict seated female figures with enigmatic expressions, often stylized with exaggerated hips and intricate markings. They may represent goddesses, ancestors, or symbolic concepts of fertility and protection. But some figurines show broken limbs or deliberate fragmentation, raising questions about ritual use or symbolic deconstruction. The Cucutini Tripilia people seem deeply attuned to cycles: birth, life, decay, and renewal, and their artifacts quietly reflect this worldview. As we imagine their settlements, it is easy to picture peaceful scenes of daily life. Families gathering around hearths, artisans painting spirals on clay vessels, farmers tending to the land, children playing among the ring-shaped village layouts. These images feel calm, grounding, almost soothing. Yet, in the background, there's the ever-present knowledge that one day, the entire village would be set aflame in a collective act no one living today fully understands. This juxtaposition of tranquility and ritual destruction captures the essence of the culture's mystery. The disappearance of the Cucutini Tripilia culture carries a similarly gentle tone. There is no sign of violent collapse, no charred ruins of warfare, no mass graves, no scars of sudden destruction. Instead, the settlements seem to have been gradually abandoned, their inhabitants dispersing into new regions, merging with other groups, or adopting new ways of life. Over time, their identity dissolved, leaving behind only pottery fragments, burned clay, and faint traces of circular village plans. Their memory rests quietly beneath the soil, waiting for archaeologists to uncover small clues and for storytellers to contemplate the meaning behind their rituals. As we draw this section to a close, the image of a Tripilian village burning in controlled, ceremonial fire lingers softly, an orange glow flickering against the night, smoke rising slowly into the sky, sparks drifting like tiny stars carried upward by the wind. The villagers stand together, watching the flames consume the structures they once called home, knowing they will build anew when dawn arrives. It is a haunting yet peaceful image, a reminder that destruction and creation are often intertwined in ways we cannot fully comprehend. From these smoldering ashes of Eastern Europe, our journey continues onward, moving toward another civilization whose sudden disappearance left archaeologists facing a different kind of enigma, one written not in fire, but beneath layers of deep, ancient ice. Across the vast sweep of the North American continent, long before cities rose or stories were written in stone, there existed a culture so ancient and so foundational that archaeologists once believed it represented the very first humans to set foot in the Americas. This was the Clovis culture, a people defined not by monuments or settlements, but by the elegance of their stone tools. Known for their beautifully crafted, finely fluted spear points, the Clovis appeared around 13,500 years ago and disappeared only a few centuries later, leaving behind a silence as cold and deep as the ice sheets under which they once lived. Their brief presence feels like a whisper carried on the wind of early human history, clear for a moment, then gone without explanation. In the world of the Clovis people, the Earth looked dramatically different from today. Massive glaciers still covered large parts of the northern continent. Woolly mammoths, giant sloths, and prehistoric bison roamed across grasslands that stretched for miles. The Clovis were expert hunters, moving across these wide-open landscapes in small bands, following migrating herds and surviving in an environment where the line between life and death was often razor-thin. Their tools reflect astonishing craftsmanship. Spear points shaped with precision, fluted down the center to secure them firmly onto wooden shafts. These points are not only practical but elegant, revealing a deep understanding of stone, pressure, balance, and function. For countless years, they were considered the oldest human-made artifacts in the Americas, anchors of a story that felt stable and clear. But the stability of that story, much like the ice sheets themselves, eventually began to melt. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of humans in the Americas thousands of years earlier than the Clovis, challenging the once confident narrative of Clovis first. And yet, even as the timeline shifts, the mystery of the Clovis disappearance remains intact. Their culture seemed to flourish rapidly, spreading across much of North America, and then, just as suddenly, vanished. The archaeological record shows no gradual fading, no slow decline. Instead, their presence comes to an abrupt end around 12,900 years ago, replaced by different tool traditions and different ways of living. As with many ancient cultures, the question is not just how they disappeared, but why. One of the dominant theories centers around the extinction of megafauna. The Clovis lived during a period of dramatic environmental change. As the world warmed at the end of the last ice age, habitats shifted. Mammoths and other massive animals began to die out. Some scientists argue that the Clovis relied heavily on these large animals for food, tools, and clothing. When the megafauna disappeared, the Clovis way of life, specialized, efficient, and focused on big game hunting, could no longer sustain itself. The people may have adapted, shifting into new cultural forms that archaeologists classify under different names. In this interpretation, the Clovis did not vanish. They simply changed. Another theory suggests that something far more dramatic occurred. Around the time of the Clovis disappearance, a sudden cooling event, known as the Younger Dryas, plunged the world back into near-glacial conditions for more than 1,000 years. This sharp drop in temperature would have disrupted ecosystems across the continent, altering plant growth, animal migration patterns, and water sources. In such an unpredictable world, the Clovis hunting strategies might have become impossible to maintain. The people would have been forced to disperse, adapt, or perish. This explanation aligns with environmental shifts observed in many ancient mysteries. Cultures often respond abruptly to climate extremes, leaving behind gaps that confuse archaeologists thousands of years later. There is also the more controversial idea of a cosmic impact, a comet or meteor fragment exploding over North America, igniting wildfires and contributing to the extinction of megafauna. While evidence for this theory is debated, it remains a captivating part of the Clovis mystery. Some sites show layers of charcoal, unusual minerals, and microscopic particles that hint at intense fires. If such an event occurred, it could explain both the sudden environmental stress and the abrupt disappearance of the culture. Yet, with no definitive proof, the idea lingers in the space between possibility and imagination, a quiet question waiting for clarity. Beyond theories and evidence, the Clovis culture invites reflection because of what it represents: the first chapter of human presence on an entire continent. These were people who walked through landscapes untouched by other humans, who encountered creatures now long gone, who carve a life out of a raw and wild world. Their stone points feel like signatures left on the land, each one a silent reminder of skills and traditions passed down across countless generations. When the Clovis vanished, they left no villages, no ruins, no artistic murals, only their tools, buried beneath layers of earth and time. The elegance of their craftsmanship, however, creates a sense of closeness across the ages. Holding a Clovis point today is like touching a moment frozen in time. It bridges the distance between modern hands and ancient minds, between the known world and a forgotten one. The fluted design, so distinctive and so difficult to replicate, suggests both mastery and intention. These people understood their environment intimately, and perhaps that is why their disappearance feels so mysterious. How could such skilled, adaptive humans vanish so rapidly? The answer may lie not in catastrophe, but in transformation. The Clovis culture may have evolved into multiple successor cultures, each adapting to shifting climates and changing ecosystems. The disappearance from the archaeological record might be less about extinction and more about innovation, new tools, new methods, new identities. But because the Clovis left no written words, the change feels abrupt, as though the story jumps suddenly from one chapter to the next without explanation. The mystery lies in the silence, in the absence of continuity. For nighttime listeners, the Clovis mystery has a calming, almost humbling tone. It reminds us of the vastness of time, the fragility of human traditions, and the way whole cultures can rise and fade without grand monuments or dramatic endings. Their presence lingers softly in the land, in riverbeds where points are discovered, in ancient campsites revealed by erosion, in the quiet knowledge that people lived rich lives even when the world was cold, wild, and changing. As we transition from this chapter of ice, stone, and ancient hunters, the landscape transforms once again. The winds of the past carry us from the frozen plains of North America to the dense jungles of Central America. where another civilization built towering structures, crafted calendars, and pursued celestial mysteries, only to meet its own quiet disappearance generations later. In the warm, humid lowlands of what is now southern Mexico, where dense jungles breathe with ancient humidity and rivers wind like serpents through fertile plains, a civilization emerged that scholars often call the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Long before the Maya carved their temples or the Aztecs raised their empire, the Olmec people built sophisticated cities, carved colossal stone heads, and created cultural foundations that would ripple across centuries. Yet despite their immense influence, the Olmec vanished in a way that still feels shrouded in vines and shadows, quiet, gradual, and curiously incomplete. Their disappearance is not a single event, but a soft retreat into obscurity, a fading presence swallowed by the very jungle they once mastered. To understand the Olmec, one must picture a vibrant landscape of wetlands and forests, where their earliest ceremonial centers appeared around 1400 BCE. Among these centers, San Lorenzo stands out as one of the earliest hubs of Olmec power, a plateau artificially reshaped to host plazas, mounds, and stone monuments. Here, artisans carved immense basalt heads, each weighing several tons and bearing distinct facial features that suggest individuals of high status. Their presence is both awe-inspiring and mysterious, especially considering the distance between basalt quarries and Olmec ceremonial centers. Transporting such massive stones without wheels, pack animals, or advanced machinery implies a level of organization and determination that speaks to a deeply unified culture. The Olmec were innovators. They developed early forms of writing and possibly the earliest Mesoamerican calendar. Their art is unmistakable. Human figures with infant-like faces, jaguar-human hybrids, elaborate masks that hint at ritualistic transformation, and intricate motifs that influenced the Maya, Zapotec, and later civilizations. Their symbolism, spirituality, and worldview seem to have touched every culture that followed, spreading like ripples across time. Yet the people themselves remain elusive. We know them through stone and clay, through mounds covered in moss and carvings softened by rain, but not through written texts that explain their beliefs or their ultimate fate. One of the most striking elements of the Olmec legacy is the economy they built. They controlled regional trade networks that exchanged obsidian, jade, rubber, cacao, and ceramics. Their influence stretched across hundreds of kilometers, shaping artistic styles and political structures far beyond their own heartland. This interconnectedness suggests a sophisticated society, one capable of large architectural projects, elite governance, and complex religious ceremonies. But these achievements also raise the question, how did such a powerful, foundational civilization lose its prominence so quietly? Around 900 BCE, San Lorenzo, one of their major centers, was abruptly abandoned. Archaeologists found signs of deliberate destruction, monuments defaced, sculptures buried, structures dismantled. The reason remains unknown. Some believe the nearby river changed course, undermining the agricultural and economic stability that supported the settlement. Others suggest internal conflict, perhaps a rebellion or political overthrow. The ritual destruction of monuments may indicate a shift in leadership or significant cultural transformation. But just as San Lorenzo faded, La Venta rose in its place, becoming a new ceremonial center that preserved many Olmec traditions. La Venta flourished with even greater complexity. It featured a massive earthen pyramid, plazas aligned with astronomical precision, and sacred complexes arranged according to symbolic cosmology. The artistic tradition reached new heights here. Intricate mosaics, jade figurines, massive altars, and more colossal heads. The Olmec seemed not to collapse, but to shift their center of gravity, migrating deeper into the jungle. Yet around 400 BCE, La Venta, too, was abandoned. This time, the disappearance was even quieter. No dramatic destruction, no clear evidence of conflict, only the slow reclaiming of stone by nature. Other Olmec sites dwindled soon after. Within a few generations, the culture that had shaped Mesoamerica for 1,000 years was gone. The disappearance feels less like a collapse and more like a mist lifting from the landscape. Theories about their fading vary. Environmental change is one possibility. The region is prone to flooding, volcanic activity, and shifts in river systems. A major volcano in the Tuxtla Mountains may have blanketed the region in ash, disrupting agriculture and trade. Excessive flooding could have rendered lowland centers uninhabitable. The jungle may have simply become too unstable to support large populations. Another theory suggests external pressure. Emerging powers, such as the Zapotec or early Maya, may have competed with the Olmec for trade and influence. As newer cultures rose, the Olmec may have integrated into them gradually, losing their distinct identity. The Olmec might not have disappeared at all. They may have transformed, their traditions absorbed into the very cultures they influenced. A more subtle explanation is cultural evolution. As practices changed, artistic styles shifted, and political systems reorganized, the markers archaeologists associate with the Olmec gradually faded. Without written records, this transition appears abrupt, though it may have been gradual and peaceful. Their disappearance is more a gap in evidence than a sudden end. What makes the Olmec mystery feel particularly dreamlike is the environment in which they lived. Jungles grow quickly, swallowing stone and wood with quiet persistence. Over time, ceremonial complexes became hills, pyramids became overgrown mounds, and riverbanks shifted. Nature softened the edges of history, creating an atmosphere of intrigue, a sense that something grand once existed here, now hidden beneath layers of soil and time. Standing in what remains of La Vena today, one feels the presence of a civilization that breathed with the rhythms of the earth, then exhaled its final influence into the cultures that followed. In nighttime storytelling, the Olmec disappearance carries a gentle calm. Instead of fiery collapse or violent overthrow, their story feels like a slow dimming of light as evening approaches. Their cities receded into the forest. Their artifacts rested beneath moss and leaves. Their identity blurred into myth. And yet, their influence endured, whispered through Mesoamerican art, iconography, and cosmology for centuries. The Olmec are both gone and present, silent yet echoing, forgotten yet foundational. As this chapter closes, the jungle around the Olmec heartland grows thicker, the air warmer, the stone heads watching with their eternal, enigmatic expressions. And from these shadowed lowlands, our journey shifts again, toward another civilization that vanished under equally mysterious circumstances, but this time in the shadowed corners of Southeast Asia, where water, mountains, and myth intertwined to shape a kingdom lost to time. Deep within the dense jungles of northern Cambodia, where towering trees lock their branches like ancient guardians and the air hangs heavy with the scent of earth and moss, there lies the forgotten capital of a kingdom that once rivaled even the great city of Angkor. This place is known as Ko Kur, a remote archaeological site scattered with towering stone temples, enigmatic statues, and silent corridors reclaimed by nature. Today, it feels like a dream half buried in vines. But for a brief moment in the 10th century, Ko Kur stood at the pinnacle of power. Then, as swiftly as it rose, it was abandoned. Its fall was so sudden, so complete, that it remains one of the most puzzling disappearances in Southeast Asian history. To understand Ko Kur, we first step into the era when the Khmer Empire was at its height. The great kings of Angkor ruled vast territories from majestic capitals filled with canals, roads, and monumental architecture. But in 928 CE, a king named Jayavarman IV broke tradition and established his seat far from Angkor, deep in the forested frontier. The reasons for this move remain uncertain. Some historians suspect political tension or rivalry within the royal family. Others believe Jayavarman IV sought a fresh start, an opportunity to carve his legacy into untouched land. Whatever the cause, Ko-Kur became the unlikely heart of the Khmer world, transforming almost overnight from a forested outpost into a monumental city. The scale of construction at Ko-Kur is staggering, especially considering its isolation. In just 2 decades, the city flourished with more than 40 major temples, hundreds of smaller structures, and an immense beret, a man-made reservoir nearly 2 kilometers long. The centerpiece of the city is Prasit Tom, a 7-tiered pyramid rising above the canopy like a stepped mountain. Its form is unlike anything else in Khmer architecture. From the top, ancient priests may have observed alignments with celestial events, or perhaps rulers performed rituals meant to connect the earthly kingdom with divine forces. The entire complex reflects ambition, urgency, and purpose, as though the builders understood that their time here would be brief. Ko-Kur sculptures are among the most extraordinary ever produced in Southeast Asia. Massive sandstone statues depicting warriors, celestial beings, and mythic creatures once adorned its temples. Many stood taller than a human, carved with exquisite detail and heroic dynamism. The most famous among them is the giant Garuda, a mythical bird-like figure that once towered over visitors with its wings outstretched. Another masterpiece is the kneeling Hanuman, known for its expressive poise and delicate craftsmanship. These sculptures reveal a culture rich in both artistic vision and spiritual depth. But they also raise a pressing question. Why was such a magnificent city abandoned so abruptly? The silence surrounding Ko-Kur's fall is one of its deepest mysteries. By 944 CE, barely 20 years after it became a capital, the royal court moved back to Angkor. Construction at Ko-Kur halted suddenly. The temples were left unfinished. The city emptied. Today, nature has grown over the ruins in layers so thick they seem part of the forest itself. Some scholars suggest that the shift in leadership after Jayavarman IV's death triggered the city's abandonment. His successor may have lacked interest in maintaining such a remote capital. Others propose that political unity within the empire required consolidating power back at Angkor, where the infrastructure and population were far stronger. Environmental explanations also exist. Ko-Kur depended on a complex water system, and disruptions to its canals and reservoirs may have undermined its ability to sustain large populations. Though the Khmer were master water engineers, Ko-Kur's remote location and difficult terrain may have made the city vulnerable to drought or flooding. Another possibility is that the site sat along trade routes that later shifted, diminishing its strategic significance. Over time, without the attention of kings or the presence of large communities, the jungles simply took over. Yet there is something almost poetic in how quickly Ko-Kur melted into the wilderness. The temples, once bustling with rituals and royal processions, now echo with birdsong and the rustle of leaves. Roots wrap around stone blocks, branches shade once sacred courtyards, and tree trunks pierce through ancient walls. The disappearance feels less like a collapse and more like a quiet surrender, as if nature had been waiting patiently to reclaim what was borrowed. The contrast between the city's bold rise and its gentle fall enhances its mystery. A kingdom that emerged with the force of ambition but faded with the softness of twilight. Complicating the story further is the legacy of looting and theft. For decades, Ko-Kur's remote location made it vulnerable to artifact trafficking. Many of its finest sculptures, once standing proudly within temple sanctuaries, were taken and scattered across museums and private collections worldwide. Some have been returned, but many remain elsewhere, fragments of a story difficult to reconstruct. These displaced pieces add to the sense of incompleteness, as though the kingdom's spirit has been fractured and spread across the world. In this sense, Ko-Kur's disappearance is not just physical but cultural, a fading of identity through both time and displacement. Still, the ruins today radiate a quiet, haunting beauty. Walking through the forested pathways feels like stepping between worlds. Sunlight filters through layers of foliage, illuminating moss-covered stones. The silence is deep, broken only by insects and the distant calls of birds. Every structure feels like a whisper from the past, inviting contemplation rather than explanation. Ko-Kur is a place that asks not to be solved entirely, but to be felt, to allow its mystery to settle gently in the mind. In the context of our nighttime journey, the story of Ko-Kur carries a soothing, reflective tone. It reminds us that not all disappearances are dramatic. Some are gradual, rooted in political shifts, environmental challenges, or the quiet turning of human priorities. The kingdom's end is soft, like the dimming of a flame rather than its extinguishing. But even in disappearance, Ko-Kur left behind beauty, towering pyramids, expressive statues, and an atmosphere of tranquil wonder. As we prepare to leave this forgotten capital behind, the jungle seems to breathe deeply around us, drawing its green curtain over ancient stone. Our path now leads us westward, across oceans and continents, toward another vanished kingdom, one shaped by trade winds and maritime power, whose rise and fall unfolded in harmony with the sea. Far beyond the famous rose-red walls of Petra, beyond the carved facades that glow like embers under the desert sun, there existed a far larger and more intricate Nabatean world, a network of trade routes, hidden cities, mountain shrines, and desert fortresses that once pulsed with life across the Arabian Peninsula. The Nabateans were masters of the in-between spaces, the quiet corridors of sand and stone, where caravans moved like drifting constellations, carrying incense, spices, and silk from one end of the ancient world to the other. They were a people who thrived not through conquest, but through mastery of terrain, diplomacy, and engineering. Yet, for all their ingenuity, they vanished so softly that no one can say with certainty when their civilization truly ended. Like footprints erased by the wind, their culture simply faded into the desert until only ruins remained. To understand the Nabateans, we must step away from the familiar imagery of Petra and venture deeper into their world. In places like Higra, Avdat, and Mada and Sali, where quiet tombs rise from remote cliffs and ancient inscriptions that stone walls like messages left for travelers long gone. These sites remind us that the Nabateans were not isolated artisans, but sophisticated organizers of trade networks that stretched from Yemen to Gaza, from Damascus to the Mediterranean. Their caravans transported frankincense and myrrh, precious resins once valued as highly as gold. As the aromatic trade flourished, so did the Nabatean cities, transforming barren deserts into hubs of wealth and innovation. One of the most remarkable aspects of this civilization is its water engineering. The Nabateans possessed an unparalleled ability to read landscapes. They carved channels into cliffs, built vast cisterns beneath the sand, and designed systems that collected every drop of rain that fell upon their harsh homeland. In a region where water dictated survival, their mastery of hydrology allowed them to expand where other cultures faltered. They understood the desert's rhythms, when the seasonal floods would come, how much water each slope tended to gather, and where to carve safe reservoirs into the rock. This knowledge allowed them to thrive in what outsiders viewed as an uninhabitable expanse. Yet this same desert, which once protected them and sustained their wealth, also contributed to their disappearance. The Nabateans were semi-nomadic at heart. Even as they developed monumental cities, their culture retained a fluid, adaptable nature. Their writing system, though widespread, rarely recorded the intimate details of political transitions or historical events. What they left behind were inscriptions of names, blessings, and brief notes, glimpses of individual lives rather than a clear record of their rise or fall. As a result, their story is filled with open spaces, much like the desert itself, vast, quiet, and rich in mystery. The Roman annexation of Nabatea in 106 CE is often cited as the beginning of their disappearance, but this explanation feels incomplete. While the Romans took control of the region, they allowed the Nabateans to maintain many of their customs. There are signs that Nabatean culture continued for centuries, blending, adapting, and slowly dissolving into broader Arabian and Roman influences. Their language eventually gave way to Greek, Latin, and later Arabic. Their trade routes shifted as maritime commerce expanded, reducing the importance of camel caravans. The desert, once the source of their greatest strength, became the quiet backdrop to the gradual fading of their distinct identity. But their disappearance was not a collapse. It was an evaporation. Unlike civilizations that fell to war, famine, or natural disaster, the Nabateans seemed to slip gently into the folds of history. Their cities emptied slowly, losing their significance as other powers and routes took precedence. Petra, once alive with voices, performances, and market stalls, became a city of echoes. Hegra and Avdat followed the same pattern, transitioning from vibrant outposts to tranquil ruins. There is no single moment of downfall, just a long, soft blending into the cultures around them, as though they had always been part of the desert's quiet rhythms. Today, when visitors walk through Petra's Sik, a narrow, winding gorge that feels like a passage between worlds, they experience the Nabateans' flair for theatrics and mystery. The canyon twists and turns, delaying the grand reveal of Al-Khazna, the treasury, until the final moment when the stone walls part like curtains. Yet the structure itself, breathtaking as it is, represents only a fraction of their legacy. Beneath the surface lies an entire unseen world. Water channels hidden beneath the pathways, ancient staircases carved into cliffs, and remnants of agricultural terraces that hint at a civilization far more advanced than its most famous monument suggests. Across their abandoned landscapes, the sense of mystery is strengthened by the silence that now surrounds their achievements. At Hegra, monumental tombs stand in eerie solitude, their entrances guarded by winged lions and human figures carved into sandstone. Some tombs bear unfinished carvings, as though the artisans simply walked away one day and never returned. At Avdat, the remains of temples and fortresses overlook a sweeping desert plateau where the wind carries whispers of forgotten caravan routes. It feels as though the Nabateans left in a moment of perfect calm, without conflict or catastrophe, just an unhurried retreat deeper into the anonymity of time. The absence of dramatic endings gives their story a dreamlike quality, making the Nabateans feel both present and distant. Their influence lingers in subtle ways, in the architectural traditions of the Levant, in the ancient trade networks that shaped the region's history, and in the desert tribes whose lifestyles echo their nomadic past. Yet no single thread ties their story together completely. Instead, their legacy is scattered, carved into cliffs, buried in sand, and preserved in silence. In the soft, nighttime tone of this journey, the Nabateans remind us that some civilizations fade not through violence, but through quiet transformation. Their disappearance is like the desert wind, gentle, persistent, and almost imperceptible, yet powerful enough to erase even the greatest monuments if given enough time. And as we drift through their forgotten world, we sense how fragile cultural identity can be, how easily it dissolves when trade routes shift, climates change, or empires expand. Now, as we prepare to leave the desert behind, the landscape stretches wide and empty, painted in muted tones of gold and shadow. The desert's hush feels like a pause in our journey, a moment of stillness before we travel onward to another forgotten world. Ahead lies a land shaped not by shifting sands, but by rugged mountains and mysterious stone circles, where another ancient society vanished just as quietly, leaving behind enigmas etched into the very earth itself. Across the rolling plains of Senegal and the Gambia, where red earth meets endless sky and baobab trees stand like ancient sentinels, lie thousands of mysterious stone circles, quiet, symmetrical arrangements of laterite pillars that have puzzled historians for generations. These circles, crafted with a level of precision and uniformity that suggests deep cultural meaning, mark the remnants of a civilization that left no written records and no surviving descendants who claim its heritage. The Senegambian stone circle builders existed for more than 1,000 years, Yet their entire world disappeared so completely that only these rings of stone remain to hint at their beliefs, rituals, and ways of life. The silence surrounding their disappearance is so profound that the circles feel like echoes, suspended between memory and oblivion. Walking among these ancient formations, one is struck first by their sheer number and scale. More than 1,000 separate sites, containing nearly 30,000 stones, stretch across a vast region. Each circle is carefully arranged, stones roughly equal in size, cut from the earth with tools whose methods remain unknown, and transported from distant quarries with surprising efficiency. Some stones are taller than an adult, others smaller and more delicate, but all are set upright with meticulous care. The effort involved in creating these structures hints at a society with organized labor, skilled artisans, and shared beliefs strong enough to motivate such long-term construction. And yet, we know almost nothing about the individuals behind them. Archaeologists believe the stone circles functioned as burial and ceremonial grounds, though the exact rituals performed there remain shrouded in mystery. Excavations beneath some sites have revealed human remains, often individuals buried with iron tools, beads, or pottery fragments. These clues suggest a society that had metallurgical knowledge, trade connections, and spiritual practices tied to honoring the dead. But even with these discoveries, the meaning of the circles themselves is elusive. Were they markers of clan identity? Astronomical observatories? Places of ritual gathering? The stones remain silent, offering neither inscriptions nor overt symbols to guide interpretation. This absence of explanation transforms each site into a quiet riddle. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Senegambian circles is how they stand in harmony with their natural surroundings. Unlike the towering monuments of Egypt or Mesopotamia, which emphasize human dominance over the landscape, these circles seem to embrace the Earth's organic curves. They blend seamlessly with fields, groves, and rivers, as though the builders were shaping their world rather than reshaping it. This harmony adds to the tranquility of the sites. Even today, standing within a stone circle feels less like entering a constructed monument and more like stepping into a space where time moves differently, softly, slowly, in rhythm with nature rather than against it. The disappearance of the stone circle builders raises one of the chapter's most compelling mysteries. Over centuries, their society appears to have gradually dissolved. There are no signs of sudden catastrophe, no evidence of war, natural disaster, or forced displacement. Instead, the culture simply fades from the archaeological record, replaced by other ethnic groups and traditions that eventually dominated the region. Some historians theorize that changes in climate or shifting trade networks may have influenced their decline. Others suggest that internal social changes or migrations gradually transformed the community into new cultural identities, leaving behind the stone circles as their only permanent legacy. This slow, gentle vanishing mirrors patterns seen in other ancient societies that left monumental architecture but minimal historical records. The builders may have blended with neighboring groups, their language and customs absorbed into broader traditions. Over generations, their rituals may have been forgotten, their stories left untold. As oral traditions shifted and evolved, memory may have simply lost track of the people responsible for the circles. This kind of disappearance, quiet, cumulative, and unrecorded, is one of history's most peaceful yet most haunting forms of erasure. It stands in contrast to the dramatic collapses seen elsewhere, offering instead a story of subtle transformation. The stone circles also highlight a fascinating contrast between physical durability and cultural fragility. The stones themselves have endured for more than a millennium, standing firm against wind, rain, and the slow passage of time. But the culture that created them proved far more vulnerable, evaporating into obscurity even as its monuments remained. This contrast serves as a reminder that what humanity builds can outlast the societies that created them, and that memory often fades faster than stone. In the quiet of the African plains, these circles stand as both markers of presence and symbols of absence, embodying the duality of endurance and disappearance. Modern communities living near the stone circles regard them with respectful curiosity, but do not claim them as part of their ancestral heritage. This creates a rare situation in which a major archaeological landscape exists without an active cultural lineage connecting present and past. The sites are visited occasionally by researchers and travelers, but for most of the year, they sit untouched, guarded only by the whispering wind and the slow movement of shadows across the ground. Their solitude contributes to the calming atmosphere that aligns so well with nighttime storytelling. The feeling that these stones hold memories not meant to be fully understood, only gently contemplated. In a soft, sleep-friendly narrative, the Senegambian circles offer a sense of stillness that is both soothing and thought-provoking. They are not dramatic ruins or towering marvels, but quiet arrangements shaped by hands now long gone. Their power lies not in grandeur, but in patience, in the way they have waited through countless seasons, countless generations, without telling their story directly. They invite us to listen to the landscape itself, to imagine the people who stood where we stand now, and to sense the faint vibrations of a culture that once thrived and then chose, perhaps unknowingly, to step quietly into history's shadows. As our journey through this forgotten world draws this section to a close, we step back from the circles and let the silence settle once more. The stones remain aligned with a precision whose meaning we can only guess, their shapes softened by time, but their presence still steady and calm. Ahead of us lies another ancient enigma, one far to the north, in the wind-swept islands of the North Atlantic, where people built stone villages close to the sea and then vanished just as quietly, leaving behind questions etched into the salt air and rugged cliffs. On the remote Orkney Islands of northern Scotland, where icy winds sweep across wild coastlines and waves crash against rugged cliffs, lies one of the most hauntingly preserved ancient villages in the world. Skara Brae, often called the Scottish Pompeii, emerged from the sand after a violent storm in 1850 revealed stone homes that had been buried for thousands of years. What makes this place extraordinary is not only its age, older even than the Egyptian pyramids, but also its intimate portrayal of daily life. Every hearth, every stone bed, every simple storage nook still stands where it was left. Yet even in the midst of this clarity, one echoing mystery remains. Why did its people disappear so abruptly, leaving behind a village that feels as though its inhabitants simply stepped out for a moment and never returned? To walk through Skara Brae today is to step back into a world shaped by resilience and harmony with nature. The villagers built their homes partly underground, using thick stone slabs and earth to insulate themselves from harsh Atlantic winds. Each house is connected by sheltered passageways, allowing residents to move between rooms without braving the elements. These architectural choices reveal a community deeply attuned to its environment, resourceful, close-knit, and skilled in adapting to the unforgiving climate. Inside each home, the same layout repeats: a central hearth, beds on either side, and a stone dresser facing the entrance. The uniformity suggests shared customs, values, and an organized social structure. Yet despite the coziness implied by these ancient spaces, life on Orkney was no gentle retreat. The landscape, though stunning in its dramatic beauty, has always demanded a delicate balance between nature and human survival. The people of Skara Brae farmed, fished, and gathered what the land provided. They crafted pottery, carved tools from bone and stone, and built decorations that reveal a surprisingly artistic culture for such a remote settlement. Their presence here was steady and enduring. For 6 centuries, Skara Brae thrived. And then, without warning, the inhabitants vanished. No signs of violence, no mass graves, no evidence of sudden catastrophe. Just a village left intact, as though time itself paused. One of the leading theories behind their disappearance is climate change, a shift in weather patterns that slowly made life in the region untenable. Around 2500 BCE, northern Europe began to experience colder, stormier conditions. Rising tides may have threatened the coastline, eroding farmland and flooding homes. Over generations, even a small degree of environmental change could have pushed the villagers to seek safer ground inland, leaving their coastal settlement behind. The idea of a slow migration aligns with the quiet thoroughness of their departure. No valuables left scattered, no signs of panic, just a fading footprint of a people who recognized a shifting world and adapted as they always had, by moving. Another possibility touches on cultural transformation. Archaeological evidence hints that around this time, new beliefs and lifestyles began spreading through the British Isles, driven by the arrival of different tribes or evolving traditions. Skara Bray's people may have gradually integrated into larger communities, merging their identity into broader cultural waves. This kind of disappearance is gentle, almost invisible in the historical record. Instead of abandoning the village suddenly, the population may have shrunk generation by generation until the remaining residents decided the old homes were no longer suited to their needs. Such a gradual decline would explain the remarkable order left behind, an ending without chaos. Yet, despite these reasonable theories, there remains something almost dreamlike about Skara Bray's abandonment. The way the houses sit so perfectly preserved, buried under sand for millennia, gives the place a suspended quality, as though its people simply slipped out of time. This contrast between the clarity of the ruins and the opacity of their story adds to the site's deep allure. The stones speak clearly, but the narrative behind them remains shrouded in mist. It is a place where known and unknown coexist in perfect balance. The village's location near the sea also invites speculation about a more dramatic departure. The Orkney coastline is dynamic, shaped by storms that can transform the shore overnight. Some imagine a powerful tempest crashing over the settlement, forcing a sudden evacuation. Others picture the slow creep of the ocean eventually swallowing farmland, pressing families to retreat inland. The truth, like the tide, likely lies somewhere between gentle erosion and abrupt change. But what remains certain is that the people left carefully, their homes closed up, tools stored away, the hearths extinguished intentionally, signs of a farewell rather than a flight. In the nighttime quiet of our documentary journey, Skara Bray offers a special kind of comfort and wonder. Unlike civilizations that vanished in fire or conflict, this community faded away with softness. Their legacy is not one of tragedy, but of endurance. Their homes endured the storms of thousands of years. Their craftsmanship remained untouched beneath the sand, and their presence lingers in the tranquil layout of their village, preserved like a memory waiting for gentle rediscovery. What makes Skara Bray particularly soothing is the intimacy it reveals. Other ancient sites impress with grandeur or mystery, but this one feels familiar. We see where families slept, where children played, where meals were prepared. We sense the warmth of fires that once glowed in the stone hearths. The village feels lived in, personal, and human. This closeness bridges the vast gap of time, reminding us that even 5,000 years ago, life was shaped by the same rhythms: warmth, shelter, community, and change. As we step away from the stone homes and let the Atlantic wind roll over the grass-covered mounds, we carry with us a sense of peaceful curiosity. The Orkney landscape stretches out in soft shades of gray, blue, and green, the sky pressing low as seabirds' trace arcs overhead. Skara Bray recedes into the quiet, its mysteries gentle, its presence enduring. And with that calm lingering in the air, our journey turns once more, this time toward the far side of the world, to a civilization hidden in the lush embrace of the Amazon rainforest, where disappearance takes on an entirely different form, swallowed not by sand or sea, but by endless green. Deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, beyond the winding rivers, the echoing calls of unseen birds, and the towering wall of green that seems to breathe with the rhythm of the earth, lies the faint memory of a civilization that flourished where few believed large-scale societies could ever thrive. Kuhiku, a cluster of ancient settlements near the upper Xingu region, represents a stunning contradiction to long-held assumptions. For centuries, explorers spoke of the Amazon as an untamable wilderness, a vast expanse incapable of supporting complex societies. Yet hidden beneath layers of vegetation, time, and silence are the outlines of towns, roads, causeways, and massive earthworks built by a people who engineered their world with intelligence and balance. Their disappearance is as soft and enveloping as the jungle itself, their achievements nearly erased by the very environment that once sustained them. To imagine Kahiku, one must look beyond the modern rainforest and picture an ancient landscape subtly sculpted by human hands. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of large circular settlements, some housing thousands of people, connected by wide, straight roads that cut through the forest with surprising precision. Defensive earthworks surrounded many of these communities, while fields and orchards spread out in organized patterns. The people of Kahiku were skilled farmers, hunters, and engineers. They cultivated manioc, maize, and tropical fruits. They managed fish populations through intricate pond systems. They practiced a form of forest gardening that enriched the soil. Their world was not chaotic wilderness, but a carefully tended ecosystem that thrived under their stewardship. The presence of terra preta, rich, dark, human-made soil, reveals just how advanced their agricultural techniques were. Unlike the nutrient-poor earth that dominates much of the Amazon, terra preta remains fertile for centuries. It was deliberately cultivated through the addition of charcoal, organic waste, and minerals, creating farmland capable of supporting dense populations. This innovation alone suggests a deep understanding of the land, a relationship with the forest built on knowledge, respect, and long-term planning. Rather than clearing the rainforest through destruction, the Kahiku culture enhanced it, shaping an environment that could sustain them for generations. And yet, for all their achievements, Kahiku left behind few visible traces. Their wooden homes, thatched roofs, and organic structures dissolved into the soil long ago. The forest grew back with relentless vigor, reclaiming every open space, every pathway, every field. For centuries, the jungle kept their story hidden. European explorers who passed through the region in the 16th and 17th centuries reported large settlements, but their accounts were dismissed as exaggerations or fantasies. The myth of El Dorado overshadowed the quieter truth that real cities once existed here, not of gold but of earth, wood, and ingenuity. The forest simply closed over them, leaving modern observers to believe no such civilization ever lived in these depths. So, what caused the disappearance of the people of Kahiku? Unlike many ancient societies, their fall cannot be tied to a single dramatic event. Instead, the most widely accepted explanation centers on disease. When European contacts swept across South America, even indirectly, pathogens traveled faster and farther than ships or soldiers. Communities that had never encountered smallpox, measles, or influenza were left defenseless against them. The population collapse was catastrophic and occurred in waves, often without Europeans ever stepping foot into these villages. The people of Kahiku may have retreated deeper into the forest, splintering into smaller groups in hopes of escaping the unseen threat. Over generations, these scattered communities evolved new identities, languages, and lifestyles. The grand settlements were left empty, their structures quietly absorbed into the green canopy. Another layer to their disappearance lies in ecological change. As populations dwindled, the carefully managed fields, orchards, and fish ponds were abandoned. Without human guidance, the forest reclaimed these areas swiftly, reverting engineered landscapes to wild growth. Roads were swallowed by vines, agricultural plots transformed into dense vegetation, and earthworks softened under fallen leaves. The jungle's immense regenerative power erased the visible marks of human presence in just a few centuries. Where once stood engineered landscapes, only continuous forest remained. From the sky, the Amazon appeared untouched, an illusion that would persist for centuries. Despite this disappearance, echoes of Kuhiku survive among some indigenous groups of the Upper Xingu. Their traditions, agricultural practices, and social structures show subtle links to the ancient settlements buried in the forest. It is possible that Kuhiku never truly vanished, but instead transformed, its people adapting, shifting, and surviving in new forms. Yet without written records, this connection remains delicate, woven through oral histories and cultural memory rather than dates and inscriptions. The result is a civilization both present and absent, known and unknown, rooted in the past while still breathing through the descendants who walk the forest paths today. The most captivating aspect of Kuhiku is how its story contrasts sharply with the environment that hides it. The Amazon is often portrayed as a chaotic, untamed biome, but the ancient landscape tells a different story. A place where human hands once shaped rivers, guided wildlife, and nurtured sustainable abundance. The disappearance of this civilization challenges our modern assumptions about where complex societies can flourish. It also demonstrates how time and nature can cloak even the most vibrant cultures in layers of quiet green mystery. In a sleep-friendly narrative, Kuhiku carries a soothing rhythm, one of deep forests, soft rains, and the gentle hum of insects at dusk. The mystery is subtle, like a whisper carried through leaves. There is no violent end, no monumental collapse, only a slow fading. As life shifted, forests expanded, and the pulse of the ancient cities softened into silence. The beauty of this story lies in the harmony between humanity and nature, a relationship that endured for centuries before dissolving into the surrounding wilderness. As we leave the rainforest behind, the canopy closes once more, sealing the secrets of Kuhiku in its emerald embrace. The air feels warm and heavy, scented with earth and foliage. Our journey moves toward its final chapter, where we will reflect on the nature of disappearance itself, how civilizations rise, how they fade, and how their echoes linger long after their names are forgotten.